Bonjour à tous et good morning everyone. Bienvenue dans Smart World with CNBC, votre émission 100% internationale en partenariat avec la chaîne américaine business CNBC. Je suis très heureuse d'être avec vous pour cette grande première de ce nouveau format innovant. On jonglera entre l'anglais et le français, comme on le fait désormais dans beaucoup d'entreprises. Ce partenariat, c'est l'occasion pour nous de casser les codes, de vous proposer une matinale pleine de fraîcheur et sans formatage. Tous les matins, avant votre départ pour le bureau, on va faire un tour d'horizon des plus grands moments business internationaux avec les reportages de la chaîne américaine Business CNBC. Plus que jamais, nous nous sommes rendus compte de l'importance d'une économie globale, surtout en ces temps d'incertitude. Je vous accompagnerai désormais tous les matins pour un débrief news des enjeux économiques internationaux. C'est parti! Let's go.
Be smart.
For years, the biggest fear of airline executives was sharply higher fuel prices. Now planes are still on tarmacs around the world, not because of oil prices, but because of a virus. There is still huge uncertainty about how COVID-19 will play out, but it remains possible that it becomes an endemic illness as we look for a vaccine. Let's take a look at how the decline of business travel is hitting airlines.
Business travel brings in a lot of money for the airlines, but it's not expected to return to even 2019 levels for years, and that could depress profits. Phil LeBeau joins us now with more. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Joe, this is the real concern for the airlines right now, and that's not to diminish the importance of getting any kind of traveler back out there. You and I going on a vacation to Florida or California, that's important, and someday international travel coming back, but you really want the corporate traveler. This is where the airlines generate their big profits, and it really is where they generate their revenues as well. And the general feeling among airline executives is you're looking at least a 2024, if not 2025, until you get back to 2019 levels. And as I mentioned, this is the concern is that it generates about 50% of the revenue typically for the airline. So you've got three things that are compacting or impacting the business travel right now and the fact that we're not seeing it. First of all, you've got the COVID-19 concerns. And it's not just companies saying, I'm worried about our people being out on the road. It's the fact that companies, they don't want you visiting. Companies will typically tell executives, you know what, if you can do that meeting over the phone, do it over the phone. That's why there's few, if any, conventions. Meetings are down dramatically. And video calls, they're increasing because companies are finding, look, you can get most of this work, if not all of the work done through a video call, so let's do that. So as you take a look at the airline stocks, keep in mind that while we focus on the travel and demand that's out there, Delta Airlines, yesterday we were talking with the CEO in the closing bell about whether or not they're going to be able to continue to grow business with the middle seats being blocked through January 6th. And then when you talk with the other CEOs as well at the other legacy carriers, they're sitting there saying, okay, we've got to get demand coming back up, and at the same time, we've got to prepare for the fact that the job guarantees end on September 30th, and then we will have to be dramatically smaller airlines in terms of service and employees starting on October 1st. But at the end of the day, guys, you have to get the business traveler back, and there is no sense from the executives I talked to, no sense at all that it's going to be coming back anytime soon.
And should airlines receive more funds from the U.S. government than other sectors? With air travel down nearly 75% due to the coronavirus, airlines are losing millions of dollars a day. Fundings through the CARES Act has prevented mass layoffs thus far. The CARES Act provides funds to increase the federal share to 100% for airport improvement program. It also includes supplemental discretionary grants already planned for fiscal year 2020. However, the deadline to use these funds is October 1st. Most airlines are asking for an extension. Let's see where we are at with the interview of Delta CEO Ed Bastian.
Over a month ago, Delta signed a letter of intent with the Treasury Department to access a piece of about $30 billion in loans to fund your operations. Have you received any of that money?
We have not, Kayla. This was the second tranche of the original CARES Act. We've not made the decision whether we're going to access that loan or not yet. We still have a few weeks to make that decision.
So the group of Republican senators that's pushing for another $25 billion in payroll support, that would essentially be free money. That would be a grant program. But I know a lot of critics are saying, why should the airline industry specifically receive more aid if it hasn't exhausted all options available to it? Do you think that airlines should get more help from Washington if the industry hasn't tapped these loans yet?
Well, first, it wouldn't be free grant. As the first grant was, it was 70% grant, 30% loan. And so if there was an extension, it would be a 30% loan is my expectation, along with warrants that would go back to the government as well. The first grant was incredibly successful. It enabled the industry to keep the 750,000 workers employed through the face of the worst of the pandemic for the first 6 months, gave us a chance to understand with what we're dealing with, and then have an orderly plan to go forward with. And as a result of that, the pandemic is not yet where we thought it would be at this point in time. So yes, I think it makes sense if the government was to continue to extend this. This is money that's going to our workers to keep the workers on the payroll. The alternative will be you will find tens of thousands of employees across the industry that will be furloughed effective October 1st.
Ed, I guess no one can argue that it's been successful in the short term and obviously stopped you from making more layoffs than you otherwise would. I think inherent in Kayla's question was whether or not it's unfair on all sorts of other sectors that haven't received the same benefit. And I guess my question is, do you feel uncomfortable when you look at retailers, for example, that may well have done less buybacks than you in the years earlier, that may well have been less indebted than you in the years earlier, and they still are not getting the same level of government assistance? Do you feel that's been quite unfair on other sectors?
I can't evaluate the different sectors. That's the role of government to decide which sector they want to prioritize and where the funds will be deployed. The airline industry, we know, is essential to the recovery, to opening the economy back up in a safe way, and not just in the U.S., on an international scale as well. Delta was in great financial position prior to the pandemic. We had got our investment grade rating back. We'd paid down our debt. Yes, the industry was buying back shares, but at Delta, it was a very small percentage of the overall cash that we were generating. So we were very responsible stewards of cash. I don't know how you can build a big enough safety net for a pandemic that comes once in a century, but I do think it's logical for the government to consider the extension.
Well, I think that's fair, that certainly relative to your own history and relative to a couple of the other airlines, that your level of indebtedness had improved. 48%, I think, of your market capitalization at the end of 2019. But that's not low in absolute terms. And similar argument would apply, I think, to your buybacks from 2015 to 2019. $13 billion was returned to shareholders, 10 million in buybacks, 3 billion in dividends. Just this year, you've raised $21 billion, just over that. Over half of that was directly from the market. So putting aside even the government aid, do you regret doing any single dollar of those buybacks over the prior 5 years, given that you've had to fundraise at a share price significantly lower than you bought back stock at over the prior 5 years?
Wilford, it's great to be a Monday morning quarterback with the benefit of a pandemic in hindsight. The reality is, over the last decade, Delta generated $100 billion of operating cash, and the amount of buybacks were less than 20% of $100 billion. So the vast majority of the money that we invested went back into the business to improve the quality of the experience for our customers, to pay profit sharing to our employees, and to get our debt levels down to the point where we did get our investment grade rating back.
Les compagnies aériennes américaines ont déjà averti 1/10 de leurs effectifs que leurs emplois étaient en danger. L'industrie lutte encore pour surmonter la crise de la Covid-19. Le taux de passagers est toujours en baisse de 71% par rapport à l'année dernière. Et les experts prévoient qu'il est peu probable qu'ils reviennent à des niveaux d'avant-pandémie avant 2024. Cette fois-ci, les cadres s'en remettent à leurs syndicats pour demander aux législateurs une prolongation du financement de la masse salariale, tout en exerçant une certaine pression en coulisses. Global tourism has been expanding rapidly over the past few decades, but COVID-19 had other ideas and made everything change. In the US, it is being estimated that 20% of hotels have debt held in commercial mortgage-backed securities. Blackstone, one of the world's largest real estate investors, is said to be scouting for struggling hotels for investment globally. The continuing coronavirus pandemic saga has left several hotels floundering, making them rich-picking for investors and PE funds. New York City has been largely impacted as hotels only reopened last week. Let's listen for more.
No Broadway shows or access to museums means visitors have stopped coming to New York City, and that's reflected in the latest hotel occupancy data. Only 27% of rooms were full last month. That includes homeless, compared to the 89% last July. Now, a growing number of hotels in the Big Apple have missed debt payments. The Marriott W in the Financial District, Omni Hotel in Midtown, and the Hilton in Times Square. That's according to data reviewed by CNBC. And several have shut their doors. Other properties are looking at conversions. Bryant Park reportedly being turned into office space. Now, hospitality investment bank Robert Douglas says similar to what we're seeing in retail, prices of certain hotel properties have come down by around 20%. And that could create opportunities for longer-term investors. Sources say Barry Sternlicht is in the process of raising an $8 billion fund, part of which will be used to buy distressed hotel properties. Even before COVID, experts were concerned there were too many hotel rooms in New York. Get this, Kelly. Over the last 5 years, New York City has added more hotel rooms than any other market in the U.S.
Depuis mars, le département des services aux sans-abri de la ville de New York a réussi à transférer 10 000 personnes des abris collectifs vers des chambres d'hôtel. Une initiative très efficace pour arrêter la propagation du coronavirus dans la communauté des sans-abri. Les taux d'occupation ont chuté de manière drastique en raison du risque élevé de déplacement et de la nécessité d'une distanciation sociale. Comme vous l'avez vu dans ce reportage, les touristes ne vont pas revenir tout de suite. Le marché du travail est au point mort et le moratoire sur les expulsions dans tout l'État de New York est sur le point de prendre fin. Il est l'heure d'annoncer une courte page de pub et on se retrouve dans quelques instants pour le reste de l'actualité internationale. À tout de suite. Hello and welcome back on Smart World with CNBC. Let's now travel to the U.S. to take a look at its current economy. Mark Short, Vice President Mike Pence's Chief of Staff, joined CNBC to discuss the state of the U.S. economy after the report that jobless claims rose to more than 1 million last week. Data indicate layoffs remain elevated as labor market slowly improves. The rise came as U.S. President Donald Trump faces increased pressure over his handling of the health crisis. Coronavirus infections continue to spread across the U.S., prompting local authorities to restrict businesses.
What we're seeing actually is the markets are anticipating where we're headed. We're continuing to see cases falling with coronavirus. We continue to see businesses opening. I think there's been a lot of stimulus obviously put into the economy. And we see that the unemployment claims, continuing claims have come down, as you know. The bump up we think that came today in new claims we think is a seasonal adjustment. And we continue to see America open, and we're encouraged by that.
Do you think that the level of stimulus is an important swing factor? And to what extent do you think it would alter the urgency on both sides to extend and prolong stimulus measures if we did see a more meaningful change in direction, whether that's on the economy or the stock market?
Well, I think we're grateful the way that Congress came together initially with the first CARES Act and provided support through a program that I think Secretary Mnuchin brought forward in the PPP program. But I also think that right now one of our ongoing challenges has been that we wanted to make sure that unemployment insurance was provided for workers. But we hear from a lot of people, particularly in the hospitality industry, who express concerns that that the level of the $600 a week check was also a deterrence for some people coming back to work. So that I think it was necessary to provide support for workers, particularly when the virus came in from China, no fault of anyone here. But at the same time, we want to make sure that there's growth policies, which is why the president advocated for the payroll tax cut. We were unable, obviously, to get cooperation from Democrats on that. So the president took executive action, and we believe that those sort of pro-growth measures are also beneficial to making sure that the rebound continues. We know that this president's policies created 7.5 million jobs in the first 3.5 years, and we look forward to continuing the low tax, low regulatory policies that generated so much growth in our economy in the first place.
L'économie américaine a subi sa plus forte contraction économique en plus de 70 ans entre avril et juin, diminuant à un taux annuel de 33%. Le taux de chômage avait chuté par rapport aux 14,7% d'avril avec l'ouverture des entreprises et la reprise de l'activité. Mais le taux de 10,2% enregistré en juillet reste un des plus élevés depuis le début de la crise financière. As the U.S. elections are approaching, Facebook is laying the groundwork to stop Trump from using its platform to delegitimize the 2020 election results. Now, the social network is getting ready in case President Donald Trump interferes once the vote is over. Employees at the Silicon Valley company are laying out contingency plans and walking through post-election scenarios. The New York Times tech reporter Mike Isaac joins CNBC for more.
Walk us through exactly what they're telling us.
Sure. So, we've been digging around this story for a couple months now. And, I think basically for the past 4 years, Facebook has not wanted to do another repeat of 2016, which basically meant being caught off guard by the different types of activity on the platform, different foreign countries sort of meddling in American elections. And so they've really been preparing for a type of scenario in which they can get everything in order before the election. And they've done that. They've had a number of elections to sort of prepare for that in the past few years. And so over the past few months, it's been, especially as President Trump has been making some comments around the Postal Service, around the legitimacy of the vote, they've started saying, we're pretty prepared for the election. How do we get through the days afterwards, especially as it's becoming more clear that it's not going to be a one and done sort of election night, after election night it's over sort of thing, especially during the pandemic, especially during mail-in voting. It's probably going to take a few days or even weeks to sort of figure things out. So it's been a lot of just sort of contingency planning around the days and weeks afterwards. And the big question, as we stated in the article, is should political advertising, which is already a sort of hot button issue for Facebook, continue to exist at least in the weeks afterwards? And they're still debating that right now.
Yeah, you say in your piece that Zuckerberg and his lieutenants have begun holding daily meetings about minimizing the possibility of the platform being used as a tool post-election.
That's right. I mean, they clearly know or have clearly decided that, look, they don't want to be an arbiter of truth in terms of what politicians should be saying. Mark has made it clear that he doesn't want to get into, whether Trump can basically spout lies on the platform or the Democrats and what they're sort of spreading as well. And so, but one thing that's been really important to Facebook is this idea of letting everyone vote and not disenfranchising voters. And I would say they've taken an increasingly hard line on the idea that if you're trying to sort of not sort of practice basic tenets of democracy, including letting people vote or talking about the results of the vote, that's an actual hard line in the sand they're willing to draw. And so this is where they're actually considering taking down political ads, which would be a big step for them.
So, Mike, are they protective or secretive about these moves that they plan to make? Because it seems to me like something like a kill switch would be a lot more effective if the people who might be planning to exploit the platform didn't know it existed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I think this has been a real open question inside of the company for a couple of weeks at least now that we've known about it. I think it's always sort of difficult because I think they do want to make clear to their they have good, frankly, open lines of communication with Democrats and Republicans and sort of talk to them regularly about what's going on. But I do think that President Trump sort of publicly bringing up ideas that could be seen as like just really shaking the core of how voting occurs, of how our democracy and participation from the republic sort of exists, has gotten them to really ask some existential questions and place priorities internally around what is important. And Zuckerberg himself is very, very aggressive on voting in being one of the highest priorities. They have this goal right now to register 4 million people to vote through Facebook, and that's what they've been pushing a lot.
Facebook se prépare à prendre des mesures si Trump venait à affirmer à tort sa victoire aux élections pour un autre mandat de 4 ans. Les journalistes du New York Times ont reçu ces informations de la part de plusieurs employés de Facebook sous couvert d'anonymat. Facebook travaille également sur la manière dont le réseau pourrait agir si Trump tente d'invalider les résultats en déclarant que le service postal a perdu des bulletins de vote par la poste ou que d'autres groupes se sont mêlés au vote. On the world stage, Joe Biden represents the American foreign policy machine. From his years serving as chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee during his time in Congress, and later as vice president for Barack Obama, Biden knows the rules of power pretty well already. Analysts recently said that a Biden win over Trump would boost Asian markets. Disputes in areas such as technology, human rights, and trade will endure, but are likely to be tackled in a more predictable way if Biden defeats President Donald Trump. But according to analysts on CNBC, the American public wants to see aggressive policies from Biden. Let's listen.
Well, his thematic is building back better. He says if we're going to get the country back, we have to invest in the country. You're going to have to raise taxes to do that. You're going to have to be fair and equitable in how you do that. And that is going to be an adjustment on what Donald Trump has done. It's also going to take investment in infrastructure. It's going to take investment in the clean economy. This is going to be the most incredible 2 years in Washington. Presuming Biden wins and presuming the Senate goes Democratic, which it should if Biden wins, there's going to be more action in Washington since the Great Society programs were passed in the 1960s.
Steve, it is still an if, though, at this stage. And I mean, there's a long way to go in some ways. I mean, with elections, we could say, different than normal times in calendar speak. And the one thing I have an issue with is on this tax promise, right? Because, sure, you may say it's easier to get by talking about raising taxes on the wealthy on an individual basis, but it's the corporate tax element that has spooked a lot of people, given the economic outlook right now for the United States. And I just wonder if he's going about things the wrong way by sticking to this promise to raise corporate taxes, which could be quite detrimental to growth.
He's going to make it very clear that we have to invest back in the country and that everybody has to be a part of it. And it is going to go beyond just tax policy. He's talking about the climate. He's talking about what he's going to do in the world, coming back to, Paris, coming back to the WHO, attacking the coronavirus. This is going to be a very aggressive administration with a very aggressive Congress, assuming Schumer is the Senate Majority Leader and Pelosi is the Speaker of the House. So I don't think it's a mistake, to be honest, and to say, look, the country's in a mess. It's in the worst shape it's ever been. You heard Barack Obama say that. You heard Michelle Obama say that. You heard Bill Clinton say that. You heard everybody say that. You heard Steph Curry, right, the NBA MVP, say that. And so it isn't a mistake to go hard and aggressive and be honest, because that's what the American public wants right now.
Indeed. I mean, everyone wants to see a solution to the COVID-19 crisis. But in reality, I mean, we're still waiting for this vaccine to be developed. And with Joe Biden talking about getting more rapid testing, talking about getting the mask mandate through, I mean, there are even some questions over legally whether he could get that national mask mandate through. And even though we don't have as much rapid testing as people would like, we know the administration is working on it. So what is actually going to differentiate this from the promise to what is put in practice?
Well, okay, look, this election right now is a referendum on Donald Trump. It is a referendum on how he has handled the coronavirus, and he is losing. His approval ratings is about 42%, the last one that just came out. He can't win if it's 42%. So it's not going to be a choice right now between Biden and Trump. It's going to be, did Trump do a good job? Right now, the answer is no. Now, if Operation Warp Speed succeeds, if there is a real advance in a vaccine between now and Election Day, that could change. But right now, people aren't going to go look at Joe Biden's plans in particular, other than the fact that he has one. And there isn't a national plan right now that the Trump administration has put forward, since the coronavirus hit in January.
Biden est actuellement en tête des sondages nationaux et des enquêtes auprès des principaux États des États-Unis. La détérioration des relations américano-chinoises et une reprise économique inégale après la pandémie font partie des principaux risques auxquels sont confrontés les investisseurs. Je vous le rappelle, les tensions entre les États-Unis et la Chine ont fortement augmenté sous Donald Trump. Les différends entre les deux superpuissances économiques du monde vont du commerce aux préoccupations présumées concernant la sécurité nationale, ce qui entraîne des entreprises comme le géant chinois des télécommunications Huawei dans une lourde bataille. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was on CNBC to discuss the latest on the U.S. pushback against TikTok, as well as how he thinks of the Joe Biden presidency might change the United States relationship with China. Analysts expect Biden to be tough on China on more issues than just trade, but will overall be more open to dialogue. U.S. President Donald Trump signed a decree early August banning with 45 days any transaction with ByteDance, the Chinese parent company of the social network TikTok. Let's hear this in an in-depth interview with Mike Pompeo.
I wanted to go back to TikTok. I mean, clearly the focus here has been on TikTok and Huawei before that. And I was wondering why exactly the level of focus on them. Is it because of stock-specific, management-specific things at those companies that you don't trust? Or should we expect that if any Chinese company gets to that scale of penetration in the Western world, in the US, that they would also start to go into the phase where the US would want to try and ban them? Is it any Chinese company that has that sort of reach?
That's a great and important question. We haven't focused on any particular company. We've focused on technologies and the Chinese Communist Party. Our focus has not been to go after any Chinese company because of their commercial success. It's been to go after Chinese Communist Party entities or commercial entities being driven by the Chinese Communist Party that present national security risks to the United States of America. So your question says, will there be other companies that follow? I hope not. I hope the Chinese Communist Party will disconnect and not operate the way they do. But to the extent, and I anticipate this will be the case, that they continue to demand that every state-owned enterprise, every Chinese company is beholden to their security apparatus, then we'll continue to go after them to make sure that the American people have the security levels that they have an expectation of with respect to not only technology firms, but every company operating here in the United States.
And Mr. Secretary, there's a lot of talk about obviously not just selling the US part of TikTok, but it tends to be reported as plus Canada, plus New Zealand, plus Australia, and that those four countries' exposure of TikTok would be what is carved out and sold off. Why those four countries? If it's Five Eyes, why isn't the UK part of it? If it's non-Chinese US allies, why isn't Europe part of it?
I appreciate that. Look, I don't want to talk about the commercial transaction. I want to talk about protecting Americans. So that's our effort. Our effort is to make sure that when you have networks, you have information that passes across international networks all across the world. We are attempting to identify where those risks are, where these untrusted vendors might operate, and making sure that we take that risk down. And that's the mission set. That's the mission set in our conversations with TikTok. It's our conversations with every Chinese company that is connected to the Chinese security apparatus. Your listeners have to know this is a serious effort. This is a serious risk. And President Trump is serious about making sure we protect our information, our networks, and the American people.
Mr. Secretary, there's you're busy. You probably didn't get to see a lot of the convention. I don't know if you saw Vice President Biden's speech last night, but just as an American, I'm trying to figure out if Joe Biden were to win the presidency, what happens with the sanctions? Do they go back off? Do we try to resurrect that deal that the Europeans seem to want to cling to that we had with Iran? What happens with China? What should we expect? Although as you know, have they mentioned China at all during the convention? I'm not sure where they stand on that, but regimes do change. What would the future look like, do you think, Mr. Secretary?
I'll just take them at their word. They have completely ignored the threat from the Chinese Communist Party, not only during their convention, but for the 8 years that they were in office. So if history is a predictor of how they'll behave, the Chinese Communist Party would welcome the departure of the national security team that's surrounding President Trump that is aimed squarely at protecting the American people. We can do what we can do on our time in service, our time on our watch. We'll keep after it.
What would you foresee in terms of Iran? I mean, that deal is not salvageable, is it?
It's the right question. I can't imagine that it would. It's not salvageable, not because of anything that we did. It's not salvageable because this is a regime that's engaged in terror for 40 years now. This is a regime that continues to build out its nuclear capabilities. This is a regime that improves its missile program even during the time that this nuclear deal was in place. This is a regime that threatens Europe. It's conducted dozens and dozens of efforts inside of Europe to kill people. I hope the Europeans, I hope the whole world will come to see that it's not enough to say, boy, you wish the arms embargo were extended, but to actually take actions that will deliver security outcomes for their people. I can't imagine any administration that would see it any different from President Trump with respect to securing the American people from the threat from the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Let's look at the flip side. Let's say the president wins re-election. What should China think about listing companies here, or IPOs, or Alibaba, or any of the other Huawei? What do we do with to ensure that we have chips and materials from Taiwan? I mean, do we become closer to Taiwan? They wouldn't like that.
This is really easy. If the Trump administration has 4 more years, the Chinese Communist Party should begin to behave like a normal nation with respect to their economic activity around the world. They should allow the United States to invest in China on the same terms that Chinese companies can invest in the United States. They should conduct trade relationships in a way that are fair and reciprocal. They should put tariffs on that are balanced, and even they shouldn't steal our stuff, jobs from places like my home in Kansas, where manufacturers invent things, create things, patent things, and then the Chinese Communist Party just rips them off and then turns around and sells them back to us in a subsidized way. If we're on watch for 4 more years, we will continue to urge the Chinese Communist Party to simply engage in economic activity on a fair and level playing field. That'd be a good outcome. We think it's a great outcome for the Chinese people. We know it's the right outcome for the American people.
Mike Pompeo a également déclaré que l'administration Trump pourrait prendre des mesures contre d'autres entreprises technologiques chinoises faisant des affaires aux États-Unis. Le gouvernement américain continue d'affirmer que certaines entreprises transmettent des données directement au Parti communiste chinois. ByteDance, basé à Pékin, propriétaire de TikTok, est toujours en pourparlers avec Microsoft pour vendre au géant américain son activité TikTok aux États-Unis et dans plusieurs autres pays. And some actually think Amazon should make a bid for TikTok. An interesting point of view. Can big tech companies make any deal? This August, the Trump administration announced its intention to ban TikTok in the US. However, this ban could be avoided if the social network is bought by an American company. Currently, 2 companies are interested in, but Microsoft is the most serious one and the only official one as well. The Redmond firm has already announced that it is in negotiation with ByteDance. Let's hear more.
With Amazon, which is perhaps the most eye-catching one here, because you think they should be bidding for TikTok. A lot of people say, come on, with Trump and Jeff Bezos' relationship and antitrust concerns already, you think that's really likely or possible?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? After the hearing a few weeks back, even Google's Fitbit acquisition is now in full investigation in Europe. And so there is this sentiment that big tech can't make any deals. But if you look at it from a fundamental perspective, Amazon is probably the perfect fit for TikTok. They've got about 20 left to make a deal. You're absolutely right. It's probably not the choice Trump had in mind when I think he set out the executive order. But Amazon's the number 3 player already in digital advertising behind Google and Facebook. This would absolutely be an asset that fits really well in their portfolio that already includes Twitch, Fire TV. We've already seen TikTok over the last month or so make real integrations with Fire TV and with Alexa. And they've got the computing data security that was really the primary issue on-prem here in the U.S. that meets the requirements. And so, while typically I'd say Amazon's not really a big acquirer generally, but if they can get this asset, say 50, 60 cents on the dollar, it's certainly worth a phone call.
I'm sure they'd love it. I'm just skeptical that it could happen for so many reasons, not least that it's already one of the biggest and most powerful companies. And again, without that relationship with the White House that maybe Oracle has, or at least Microsoft doesn't have antagonistically. You have a lot of other ideas in here, though, and I think people would really like to hear them. You think that Facebook should look at buying Twilio. Interestingly, you think Google should look at buying eBay. I just wonder how much deal making, especially involving anything like a well-known company, these big tech players can realistically expect to do in the next few years. They're going to be lucky if their past deals aren't undone.
I think that's a very fair assessment, and I think as we looked at it, we tried to find potential targets that might be effectively outside of the regulatory purview because it wouldn't necessarily go in the areas where they're perhaps the strongest. And so, we picked eBay, which is a legacy asset. It's been around forever. And the reason why we liked it as a potential, is, our view is Amazon is now actually the leader in product-related searches in the U.S. I think our numbers come in that 60% of product-related searches start on Amazon. And we know that Google's very serious about doing more in e-commerce. They hired over Bill Reddy from PayPal. They've been enticing the suppliers and the sellers to come onto the platform with free product listings, effectively offering zero commissions on sales. And so what they really need is something to bring the consumers along for the ride. And so it may be a bit tangential to the core areas where I'd say regulators are really looking at, which is on that advertising business.
TikTok a collaboré avec Amazon cette semaine pour activer les contrôles TikTok via l'activation vocale Alexa. Cela pourrait être utile pour les utilisateurs de TikTok car cela vous permet d'activer diverses fonctions par commande vocale. Des collaborations pratiques mais qui ne laissent présager pour le moment aucun deal. Donald Trump a quant à lui apporté son soutien au géant du logiciel d'entreprise Oracle, officieusement sur les rangs pour acheter l'application chinoise. Akamai Technologies is one of the premier content delivery networks providing critical services to companies around the world. Its CEO has a unique insight into new internet technologies, especially those that promise the transformative effect of 5G. According to him, 5G is a really exciting technology for the future, not just for watching videos, but also for the potential of a lot of IoT applications. Let's listen to his interviews with Jim Cramer.
I watch and I'm a subscriber to every single NBA, MLB, NFL.com. Now, in the old days, we had Netflix, and whether you did Netflix was what determined how Akamai was doing. I think these eat up a huge amount of bandwidth. Are they your clients?
We work with Netflix, but don't deliver the long-form videos today. We're much more diversified today, so there's no single really large customer on our platform. Right. We work with pretty much all the world's major brands, including the sporting events.
Right, because, I mean, they're remarkably fast, and I'm wondering, come 5G, will we need a TV?
You'll have a device always. Maybe it's not your traditional TV. I think the devices are obviously changing, and I think 5G is a really exciting technology for the future, not just for watching video, but for the potential for all the IoT applications. And the whole paradigm of the web could be changing. You know, we already operate an IoT platform we have dozens of customers that are early adopters. The protocols there are all different than the web, and they're a lot more efficient. The paradigms are different. I think that's an exciting part of the future as the web evolves.
Now, I know that if we had been 6 months ago, say before the pandemic, I would have talked to you mostly about this fantastic foray into security, where you're the dominant security company, I believe, when it comes to content delivery. But I got remote work, home entertainment, e-learning, online banking, home delivery, logistics. I mean, these are all businesses that could run for many years that just happened in the last 5 months.
Oh yeah, no, it's there's definite tailwinds here, and it's a good reason why our profits are up 30% year over year. We're really pleased with our operating margins at 32%, and that enables us to have the firepower to continue to invest in innovative new capabilities, like we've done with security, to propel the business forward in the future.
Contrairement à ses prédécesseurs, la technologie sans fil 5G offre une latence ultra faible, des téléchargements ultra rapides et une expérience pour l'utilisateur qui sera globalement supérieure. Les opérateurs de téléphonie mobile devraient dépenser 1,1 milliard de dollars dans le monde entre 2020 et 2025 en capex mobile, dont environ 80% seront sur les réseaux 5G. Selon les économistes du World Economic Forum, l'impact économique mondial de la 5G sur les nouveaux biens et services atteindra 12 milliards de dollars d'ici 2035. Warren Buffett acquired $600 million of minor buried gold, a surprising buy, as Warren Buffett was never a big fan of this precious metal. Who made that decision? Did he change his mind on gold? Let's hear more on CNBC's program, The Exchange.
Let's talk about Berkshire Hathaway's bet on gold in a move antithetical to Warren Buffett's criticism of the magical metal. Berkshire acquired nearly 21 million shares of Barrick Gold, guys. Now, this is only $600 million. This is like 0.25% of the portfolio. Barrick Gold, though, I mean, the investors there don't care. The shares are up over 11% today. But, Dom, let's talk about what's really going on. There's no way this was Warren Buffett himself buying, right? There's no way.
The conventional wisdom and folks I talk to that are more familiar with Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway than I am all say that this is not likely something that Buffett put into play himself. This might very well be Todd Combs or Ted Weschler, the two guys that he has put in charge of the overall Berkshire portfolio. We know that Warren Buffett in the past has taken the more active role in mega huge deals, multi-billion-dollar transactions, large stakes in mega cap companies. Barrick Gold, this is an interesting move here only because we've seen the fruits of their labor. I mean, these gold mining stocks have surged in this time being because the COVID pandemic and fears about inflation have put a real tailwind to that. It's just very interesting that this Barrick Gold trade has now taken every other gold miner up along with it.
Anything you'd add to that, Robert?
Yeah, I would just say let's not confuse the company with the commodity. It's everyone saying, what, suddenly Buffett loves gold? He hates gold. Well, he's buying the company, and let's remember, it fits a lot of his criteria. It generates a huge amount of income, $4 billion last year, this year over $700 million. It's 11 times earnings, so it's fairly cheap, and it pays a good dividend. So as a company, it fits the Buffett standards, and let's not confuse it with actual physical gold, which he has rightly said it doesn't make sense for Berkshire to own.
That's fair. It's just that these companies have been around forever. Does he think now is the valuation? Whatever. That's a very, very good point. I will reserve I'll take it with a grain of salt. It just is a very head-scratching move today.
L'action de Barrick Gold a augmenté de 11% au cours de la première séance boursière de la semaine. Les politiques du gouvernement américain ont été bonnes pour le métal précieux, mais il existe encore des risques forcément pour les investisseurs. L'investissement de Warren Buffett a fait réagir car il n'a jamais été un grand fan de l'or. Il l'a même souvent tourné en dérision. Et les observateurs du milieu financier n'ont pas hésité à faire le lien entre l'achat de titres aurifères et l'un des deux autres gestionnaires de Berkshire Hathaway qui sont responsables de la gestion d'environ 12 milliards chacun. This week, Tesla overtakes S&P 500's 10th biggest stock after breaking the 2K barrier per share. This means that if Tesla were actually part of the index, it would now be the 9th largest member of the S&P 500. Tesla's momentum appears to be partly driven by the company's announcement that it would be implementing a 5-for-1 stock split in late August. Since the announcement, Tesla stock has seen a 45% rise, cementing its place as one of the best-performing stocks today. Let's listen.
Tesla's market cap now more than Walmart, but the chartmaster says it may be time to pump the brakes on this red-hot automaker. Carter Worth, take it away.
You bet. Obviously, it's a phenom, it's epic, but there are also sequencing patterns in any ascent or descent, and that's what we're going to try to look at right now. So the first chart, this is just an all-data chart. Since the IPO back in 2010, it was exactly a decade ago, June, the summer of 2010, no judgments, annotations by me. Now take a look at the second chart. What I've tried to show here is the sequencing. Basically, after the IPO in 2010, you have a dormant period, right, where the stock between 2011 and 2012 doesn't do anything. And then basically, it goes on a 10x move. You can see that there. Then sideways again, and then another 10x move. So take a look at the third chart, and now you can see where I've put those numbers in. So basically, IPO at $17 on the stock split, it'll be down to 3.5 at the end of this month with the split, 5-for-1. But essentially, after the IPO, a very quiescent, dormant period for 2011, 2012. And then essentially, Tesla goes on a tear, literally 25 to 250 a share, a 10-bagger. And then is dormant again, which you can see there from basically 2015 to 2019. A lot of volatility, but making no net progress. And then here in the past year, similar to the one-year 10-bagger in 2013, we see again a 10-bagger, in this case 210 to today's high, 2100. So the issue is any given time, a stock has the prospect of going up, down, or sideways. Like in good test taking, you want to try to eliminate the scenario or scenarios you think are unlikely. And I think meaningfully higher on an intermediate basis is unlikely, and that leaves us with sideways or down. And so I've written in there dormant with a question mark. Are we now entering the next phase where it has to, let's say, catch up with its valuation? So 2 more slides. Take a look at the fourth. This is a slide. It just, incredibly, if one had put $10,000 into Tesla at its IPO, a whopping 1.2 million. Now, that's nifty. And then just to put that in comparison, the final slide, look here at if one had put 10,000 since Tesla's IPO in other marquee names. Netflix would have returned your 10,000. You'd be at almost a 3-bagger, 293. Amazon, you'd have 280,000, and Apple 130. Not bad, 10,000 to 130, but no Tesla.
Tesla dépasse Walmart en valeur, marquant une autre étape extraordinaire dans la montée du constructeur automobile électrique. Une récente augmentation de la valeur de l'action de l'agence a porté sa capitalisation boursière à 373 milliards de dollars, éclipsant les 370 milliards de dollars du groupe agroalimentaire américain. Le constructeur de voitures électriques devrait être inclus dans l'indice S&P après avoir enregistré 4 trimestres rentables consécutifs. Tesla suscite beaucoup d'optimisme parmi les investisseurs et montre beaucoup de potentiel de croissance dans les années à venir. One of many hottest stay-at-home stocks might be set for extra upside. Video conferencing stock Zoom Video has already rallied practically 330% this year. Facebook mentioned earlier this week that Zoom could be among the many apps out there on its portal gadget starting September. That breakout from consolidation is expected to give Zoom extra momentum to proceed its rally. Let's listen to what traders have to say.
Hey there, traders and investors. Todd Gordon here with Ascent Wealth Partners. This is CNBC's Trading Nation. Guys, we're going to take a look at Zoom here today. Zoom has held in extremely well. A little bit of consolidation over the last couple of weeks, but we're pushing higher on the back of news that Facebook in their video conferencing portal will actually support Zoom. Facebook is going after sort of the corporate kind of clients in the new work at home, stay at home environment that really looks like it's going to be with us longer than we imagined. We use Zoom quite a bit right up here on my back monitor here. We have earnings coming up here on August 31st. I record this on the 20th, so I'd like to put a trade on that would take advantage of a move up here. So if we look at the chart, you can see that it's just an unbelievable uptrend here in Zoom. And as I've mentioned, we have just recently broken through this bit of consolidation, and we don't see any reason why we should not be able to continue higher, moving up into the 300s and beyond. We hold Zoom in our global growth strategy, consulting with Chris Lai, who is our senior portfolio manager. He sees no reason to add to the stock position here. It's a core holding. It's very overdone. We have no plans to add, but if you're an options trader and you're so inclined, you want to take advantage of a short-term move up in earnings, here's one way you might be able to do it. So looking at the option chain here, I'm looking out at the September monthly options, buying the 290 strike call as we trade 289 right now as I record this, buying the 290, selling the 310. So that's going to be a $20 call spread for which you'll pay $8.05 or $805. So it's a max potential profit of $2,000 subtracted from the $805 that you pay would leave you roughly $1,200 of max profit. Now, to position size this, guys, I like to use a 50% kind of stop loss rule. So if the $8.15 gets cut down to about $4 and 5 or 10 cents, half of the premium paid is gone. Probably best to close that trade, contain the risk and move on. So position size such you have half of the premium paid at risk. Let's go ahead and I'll put that little option trade to work. This is an earnings trade, as I mentioned, so position size such that if the move were to go against us, there's no liquidity in the options market after hours, so you're okay with the risk that you have going into this. But again, a core holding in our portfolio, just a short-term option trade. The use of Zoom has been unbelievable. CNBC had a great article showing that in May there was about 15 or 17 million active users on their mobile platform. Now in May, it was up to 143 million. This is on their mobile platform. So unbelievable times that we live in, and Zoom is one of these companies that's benefiting in this new work at home, stay at home environment. So that is the setup in Zoom. For CNBC's Trading Nation, I'm Todd Gordon of Ascent Wealth Partners. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Trading Nation. You can find me at Todd Gordon, AWP for Ascent Wealth Partners. And we'll see you guys in the next video update.
L'excitation autour de Zoom ne faiblit pas. Zoom débarque sur Google Nest, Amazon Echo et Facebook Portal dès septembre. Une opportunité qui permet à Zoom d'étendre encore davantage sa domination dans le domaine de la visioconférence. And Uber and Lyft obtained a delay in California. The vehicle for hire platforms had threatened to suspend their service on August 20th if the courts forced them to reclassify the drivers as employees. Uber, Lyft, and other companies staged a counterattack. They have formed a coalition to organize a referendum next November on a bill allowing them to continue to operate with independent drivers, but with enhanced social protection. Let's listen.
The fight certainly isn't over, and you could see yesterday's extension as at least a short-term win for Uber and Lyft because they didn't go dark this morning in California. They get to continue to operate as they always have, at least for the next few months. The big pivotal next moment for the status of drivers in California will be that November 3rd ballot initiative, where voters are going to get to decide whether independent contractors currently serving as drivers will have to be turned into employees. Uber and Lyft, they cite a survey that shows that about 1 in 4 drivers actually don't want to be employees. They want to remain independent contractors because it gives them more flexibility. And at the same time, Uber and Lyft are saying that they can deliver some benefits and some protections without actually bringing on all of their drivers as employees. However, there is a very vocal group of drivers as well, and these are largely the ones that do not work part-time. They work evenings and weekends. They put themselves at risk amid the pandemic, and they say that they deserve these protections and benefits that employees get. So it's a fierce debate, and really we won't know where those lines are drawn until that November 3rd ballot. Yesterday, it felt like it was this big dramatic moment for the gig economy where Uber and Lyft were threatening to go dark at midnight if they didn't get an extension. That extension was granted, so ride-sharing continues to operate. It felt like it came down to the moment. In reality, we've been talking about AB5 for years. Uber and Lyft have had since January, when it was actually made into a law to figure out a way to turn their drivers into employees. They haven't done so. Instead, they've said that AB5 doesn't apply to us, so we're going to continue to operate as is. They've had lots of time to figure this out, but they've chosen not to. So that's when it came down to this really public showdown. And keep in mind that California is a significant part of gross bookings, but for Lyft, it's about 12%. For Uber, it's less than 9% of overall gross bookings. However, it could have really important implications for the longer term because California is acting first on this sort of gig worker law, but other states like Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, they're watching what happens here in California very, very closely because they're considering legislation of their own. The precedent that is set in California could have a very wide impact outside of the state and for the United States in general.
Uber et Lyft ont menacé d'être forcés de fermer si la justice les forçait à requalifier ces chauffeurs de VTC indépendants en salariés. Après avoir fait appel, un délai leur a été accordé. Les arguments oraux en faveur de l'affaire Uber et Lyft ont été fixés pour le 13 octobre. Si l'injonction préliminaire est confirmée, Uber et Lyft auraient 30 jours pour se mettre en conformité avec les conditions d'emploi établies par la loi californienne. Major news publishers ask Apple what can get them an App Store deal like Amazon's. They now join fight against Apple over App Store terms. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are among companies seeking more favorable terms in Apple's App Store. In a letter to Tim Cook, they said the outlets want to know what it would take for them to get better deal terms, which would allow them to keep more money from digital subscriptions.
Jason, good morning. Good to have you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Getting awfully interesting now after Cook's testimony, after the video from Epic, and now a letter that you've written to Cook. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, very simply, we were just asking a question, which comes from that hearing of the major tech CEOs a few weeks ago. In that hearing, there's a lot of questions and concerns around Apple's App Store and how they favor possibly their own services, whether it be Apple TV, Music, and the various products that they offer up on the App Store. But interesting enough, in that line of questions, Congressman Johnson, I believe it was, asked Tim Cook a very specific question about Amazon's deal with Apple. And Tim Cook said that they had a better deal and that anyone else could have that deal if they met the conditions. And so we asked a simple question, what are those conditions? Because you've got the two largest companies now on the planet that have a secret deal. And we think everyone else needs to understand what that deal is and what those conditions are.
Do you think this was possible without the Epic pushback, or, was this inevitable either way?
I think it was inevitable either way. Frankly, we were working on this letter the second we heard that testimony. It was only a few hours later that Congress even released emails between Tim Cook's top executive that runs the App Store, Eddie Q, that were sent to Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, outlining the terms of those deals. So we were curious about these conditions and how other companies could receive them regardless of the Epic deal. The Epic deal just added, I think, more fuel to the fire.
Jason, it seems to me that news organizations are in this interesting position in this fight because they used to be a platform for local commerce themselves. And I know all the organizations that are roll up into Digital Content Next aren't newspapers, but they put themselves largely in this position by giving their product away for free, now trying to create commerce around it. Is that part of what makes this digital era challenging for so many members of your organization?
Yeah, we represent, to what you said, we represent a lot more than just news companies, entertainment companies, big, small, old, new. But, they're all looking for what is the future business model. And to your point, the advertising market for free service, Google and Facebook, swallowed that up in their duopoly. And there's a lot of significant antitrust questions right now for Google and Facebook, too, around the advertising market. And so everyone's looking to see, can I go direct to the consumer and have them pay, especially the premium companies that have substantial value. And so you're seeing innovation around entertainment and news to go direct to the consumer. And so the terms of those arrangements, especially for the most celebrated operating system out there that is built into all the future products, they really matter. And so we need to understand what those terms are.
Les développeurs d'applications, y compris les éditeurs de journaux, paient à Apple 30% des revenus des premiers abonnements effectués via les applications iOS. Cette commission est réduite à 15% après la première année de l'abonné. Apple affirme que la répartition des revenus est similaire à celle des autres marchés d'applications et permet à l'entreprise de couvrir les dépenses d'exploitation de l'App Store. Thank you all for being with us. Merci à tous d'avoir participé à ce format 100% hybride. See you very soon for the rest of international news.